Okay, so what I'd like you to do is gather around, make room for each other. And this is what I would like to encourage you to do in your classrooms, is create an altar. And the reason why is if you take a look at the altar, I have a lot of pictures on here, don't I? And maybe even part of my Buddhist culture, okay? And I'd like you to think about is, for those of you that are of European heritage, if I were to ask you point blank, do your students know your European heritage? Why is that important? Well, because white students have told me all throughout the country is, I feel so uncomfortable when diversity issues come up because I don't know who I am. And it means I have to look at myself. And the teacher never even talks about it either, so I think they're uncomfortable too. So I would like you to think about maybe the reason why, the reason why you don't show it, your European heritage to your students is because your professors didn't do that to you either. And so I want you to think about that as we start, so that white students don't get uncomfortable and defensive or in denial or adversarial when we bring up the issues of ethnicity. Or even that dreaded word called white, okay? So that's why I set it up. I also think it's really important that students bring their own pictures of their family, of their relatives, so that we start having to see people of color actually having parents, actually having grandparents, so that we can start getting away from maybe the only one-sided stereotype that Donald Trump keeps expressing is blacks must be poor, in the ghetto, in crime, seeing shooting every day and starving. Or as one black student said is, here I'm going to a university and a student says, do you want to take home all the leftovers because you probably don't have food at home? So there's kind of like this perceived stereotype that we have, or that his mother has 4 kids, and they all assume, the students, that she must have got pregnant when she was a teenager. And if you really look very closely, white people have a higher pregnancy rate than people of color. White people have, if not for strike 3, were the greatest amount of people that were in our jails. They are the most people on welfare. Of all the serial killers in the United States, white people lead it. Of all the shooters in our schools, 98.9% are white people. White males are the shooters in our schools. The #1 perpetrator on the internet to bully are white adolescent girls. So I really have started a brand new term called white on white crime.
Yes.
And I think that whites need to take a good look at, do they have a propensity for violence? And also 1.5 million white people are illegally in the United States. And I think we need to start looking for their birth certificates and licenses and stop them at stop signs and make sure that when they vote, we want to see their birth certificates to be sure they're actually legally American citizens. When I shared that in Arizona, they were very upset with me. And I said, well, we should start a hunt for these illegals that are white. And by the way, at least 500,000 are illegal Asians. So the Malta minority, we need to start looking for us too. Because we may have successfully have blended in, wearing clothing that hides our ethnicities, okay? So I'm looking forward to the stringent voter ID checks that we're looking for to happen. And by the way, for those of you that don't say anything, we have a rampant voter ID problem in the United States. In the past 12 years, 10 people have voted illegally. Oh, that's an epidemic. And do you realize those 10 people could have actually changed an election result? Of course, then again, it could not possibly be because of discrimination. Okay, so why I want you to look at this is I'd like you to point to one thing on this altar that you're curious about. Now, what you'll discover is, right now, I have now asked this question, is now 8 seconds have passed. And not one single one of you have pointed to something on the altar, except for her. Now, what you'll discover is adults always do this. To see before they point. Kids will point to at least 6 things within 3 seconds. Okay? So what you've learned to do, or what you subconsciously have done, which may you even teach your students this without even knowing, is you've taught them how to be cautious. Along with that, you have also taught them, be careful you don't make a wrong choice. So a preschool teacher once said to me recently, about 3 months ago, when do children lose their creativity? I've never heard that before. And so, being teachers, they said 5 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old, 9 years old, 15 years old. They kept yelling out all these numbers, okay? And I said, no, I think children lose their creativity and spontaneity when we as teachers tell them that there's only one right answer.
Exactly.
And that when you think about it, the measurement to go to college is to consistently have at least 90 or more one right answers to be able to go to college. So what have we taught our students? Think about it. And also today when we talk about multiculturalism and you're looking at my altar, is how many of you are wearing something that's symbolic of your culture coming to a diversity workshop? And if you are even wearing it, is anyone even curious? And when your students get ready to graduate from Mesa College, what do you tell them to wear on the first day of their interview? Would Judy wear this?
Go, Judy.
And the question you might really ask Judy is, when she went for her first educational interview, did she wear this? And I could see her face stop nodding. You see, yeah, more than likely not. And then more than likely when you see her nodding, it was because she's now reached a place where she doesn't give a damn. But even then, people will wonder at any given moment, will what I wear become an issue with my students, with administrators, and how to look professional? I can guarantee you she would not be hired in 99% of any corporation in the United States. And she knows it and I knows it. I know it. So when you look at this altar, it is a symbolism like culture. It is about my people. It tells a whole story, doesn't it? Think about what if you had that in your classroom, what that would be like. What would you put that's cultural on yours? And for those of you that have no idea, that you might have even forgotten what your culture is, aren't you lucky? There's one person in America who could answer your questions, and that's Siri. In my generation, who the hell was Siri? So take a look at this, and this picture right here, is that what you asked, or was it this one?
Yes.
This one? This is my mother when she got married, and my mother, it was so funny, she wanted to be so American, she did a hongjiong, which is a Chinese dress, and a formal one, and it was of the American flag. So I thought that was so funny how she did that. And my father at that time was also in the Army. And one thing that's really important, which I didn't know, is that my father was not allowed to be in the barracks with any white person. And for those of you that history does not tell you about this, is that they were all put in separate barracks, and of course, like black people and Latinos, we were cooking, cleaning the latrines, and everything like this. And if you get to see that film, Men of Honor, Cuba Gooding is on a ship in which he's a Coast Guard guy, and of course they're on the ship doing all the cooking and the cleaning, and the white people, it's like a plantation. And what's really amazing is on Tuesdays, they get to jump in the ocean just to cool off. However, people of color were not allowed to be in the same ocean as white people. So they had a separate day. Please raise your hand if you have seen that in our history books. Please raise your hand if you did not know this until today. Be honest. You knew it?
Well, I watched the other one.
You saw the other film,
yeah,
right.
I saw the other film.
So I want you to think about that. And then what happens when those fathers or grandfathers tell their children that in fact they were in separate barracks. That in 1956 my father was not allowed in San Francisco to go to a single white restaurant to go to the bathroom. And then in 1959, Willie Mays Day was declared, a famous baseball player, only so that he could buy a house in San Francisco. So 1964, when we started to have the Civil Rights Act, there was a whole lot this country did not do. And we brag about it today. And maybe history will hide what Colin Kaepernick just recently did. But there are people who will remember what it was like. And so that picture of my mom, is this is my dad when they got married. My mom said that he was so persistent, but she really was headed to marry the dancer, this guy who loved to dance. And years later, when my father became a multimillionaire and so much into business, my mom would turn to us and say, I should have married the dancer. Anyone else?
May I?
So you can come on over.
May
Can we
I?
pick?
Yes, pick one.
Well, I noticed these.
Okay, these are a painter by name of Susan Boulay, who her paintings were really only this big. And she was only about 4 feet 10. And I'm a poet and a storyteller. And so I make up poems on the spot. And I used to get through college, I used to go up and down Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley. And for $1, I would have any couple. I would give me one word and I would make up a love poem for the two of them. I know people love that. Yeah. And I found out later on, my grandfather, who's in this picture right here, was both a carpenter and a poet, which I did not know. And so I guess it must be in my blood.
Yeah.
And yeah. And let's see, what picture did you point to again now?
The
Oh, that one right there, yeah. And so, yeah, she died at 54 years of age, and she used to put her paintings up on the screen, and then I would make up a poem on the spot for audiences. So, yeah, I guess life is like a poem to me. I also think that perhaps mindfulness, which I'll be teaching you today, is about being in the moment. In other words, not going too far ahead or too far back, but being absolutely in the moment. So I noticed that many of you asked me today, throughout the hallway, etc., how are you? And I watched, I hope people have a conversation. How are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. Fine. How are you? And it kind of sounded like a little chorus that you hear. And I always go like this, I'm starving. I was looking for a restaurant last night that was Asian or Thai. Or I'll just say I'm tired or whatever. And then suddenly people have a conversation with you. The Japanese say we ask the most intimate question, how are you? And we're halfway down the hallway. So if you ever want to change the system that you have that's continuously impersonal or detached, say something personal. Like, I'm really pissed today. My daughter, or my son did this, or my husband came home late, or I lost my job. Now watch how the conversation will change. Or it might be I'm really feeling depressed today. I did not want to come to work. And imagine what would that be like if you actually brought yourself into the room. What that does, it gives permission for other people to talk about it. So if you want intimacy, don't talk about intimacy, don't talk about honesty, don't talk about respect, actually do it. That's probably the best possible way to put it into practice. And today, we're absolutely going to do that, okay? Anybody else want to pick one more out? And everyone always picks that one out. And what people always try and do is go like this to make it look right. And what it is this is my grandmother. And she died when my mom was 3 months old. And she has always come to me and talked to me. So my very first Asian folktale story I made up, I did not know the ending. So I was in front of the audience playing my mandolin, and I said, I'm now going to tell you a story. One of the stories that my grandmother never told me. And the little kids go, that's great. And the adults are going, that's impossible. You're going to tell a story that your grandmother didn't tell you. And then I also have, it's really fun, I play this mandolin, and then I stop playing, and it keeps playing because I have a recording that I hit down here, and the kids are going, this is going to be great. And all the adults are going like this, where is that music? I got to find it. So little kids move right into the imaginary within seconds. So I want you to think about is, when did you lose your imagination and want to look for something tangible or factual to prove that it was actually true? And so guess what? What ended up is my grandmother told me the ending to the story and whispered it to me. Now, luckily, they haven't put me away for a while, but I believe that we actually can hear our ancestors at any given time. The American Indians say you could always, before you go to sleep, and ask your ancestors to come to you. So for those of you who have forgotten your ancestors or have no idea who they are, you can ask at any given moment for them to come to you. And you might be surprised How many of you know exactly what I'm talking about? Raise your hand. How many of you have no idea what I'm talking about and wondering right now is what kind of workshop am I coming to? Now imagine I told this story to 25 truckers in Minneapolis. We had a 2-day workshop. And they were absolutely, one of them said to me is, what in the world possessed you to wear what you have on today? And I looked at them and I said, what possessed you to wear your cap every single moment of the day? And they said, well, everyone else does. And I said, well, in Berkeley, we all wear this. Okay. So as you could probably tell, we're starting this workshop. What I've said is I would like to encourage you to put this in your classroom. Not mine, but yours. And if you were to put something cultural, what would it be? And for those of you that are looking all around the room at each other, hopefully, do you know each other's ethnicities? Or is it only people of color who have a culture? And you know why I ask that? Because not one single person in America knows Donald Trump's ethnicity. Not one single person who's moderating in any of the debates has asked him one single question on his European heritage. Or Hillary Clinton's, or Bernie Sanders. Of course, he talked a little bit about being a Jew. But why is it that we only know Ben Carson's? Why is it that we question President Barack Obama's? And by the way, let me show you how amnesiac we are to European heritages. Please tell me the European heritage of President Barack Obama's mother. It was in every magazine. It was on all the front newspapers. It's in his book. It was in Newsweek. They said what his mother's European heritage was. Please tell me if you know what his mother's European heritage is.
Irish? Was it Irish?
Just guessing.
Oh, I thought.
In other words, we read it, boop, he's black. One drop of black, you're black. And so today when we begin is, what part of yourself do you not bring in the room? As I said before, if I were to ask your students, if I were to ask your colleagues, what is your European heritage? Would they know? And one more thing. You could say you ask, but do you? And when I look, for instance, Jim, for instance, and I got to talk to you for a few moments, didn't I, Jim? And Jim, would you come forth here just for a second? Since I have all your apt attention. How many times have you heard this, Jim? My God, you speak such good English. Where'd you learn it from? How many times have you been asked that?
Several times.
Really, by who?
Oftentimes by Japanese, particularly if I was in Japan.
So how many white people in this country have said that to you?
Probably 3.
And why did they say, you speak such good English, where'd you learn it from?
Usually because we were in some kind of multicultural setting, conference, seminar, or something like that.
I would like to propose to you that most European Americans almost never get asked that. Please raise your hand if you have never been asked or told, you speak such good English, where'd you learn it from? Raise your hand if you've never been asked that. You've been asked that lots of times?
Not lots of times, but I'm Mexican. And so
Okay, so that might. And you get mistaken, don't you?
Yeah, all the time. And
All
so
the
a lot
time.
of family members who have said that to me
Right.
in a condescending way.
Good. Or maybe Pawa? Pawa? How would you pronounce it? Pahua? How many times have you been asked or told, you speak such good English, where'd you learn it from?
A few times.
Yeah. In fact, I get told that at least daily times, at least 3 or 4 times a week. Raise your hand if you've been told that. You speak such good English, where'd you learn it from? Raise your hand. Put it high. Now, keep it up. In other words, more than 5 times in your lifetime by white people. Okay? Now keep it up. Now take a look. The rest of you, turn around and look. Because I think in this country what we do is we do this when we get really scared. We don't want to look. Maybe how many times have many of you been told something like this? My God, Bong, you are a credit to your people. See how many people have been told that? Raise your hand. And one more time, it reminds you that you're not an American. And you even, if you were born in South America, Mexico, Guatemala, I can guarantee you how many Olympians went to Rio and did like this. Damn, there were only 3 Americans in the whole room in Brazil. Or as I said to a Harvard professor who was from Peru, my God, what an honor, I said to him, to meet another American. He started crying. He said, this is the first time someone's called me an American from Peru. How many of your students think they're the only Americans sometimes when they're in your classrooms in a sea of people of color? That mindset is sitting in the middle of Donald Trump's head. Who's an American and who's not? Because I have not yet heard him say we're going after the 1.5 million illegal whites, Europeans, the 500,000 Asians that are illegally in this country. And I'll guarantee you, if I were to bring that up to him, it would be like this. Thank you, but how about the Mexicans? Without even answering my question. And by the way, Donald Trump, his father told him he was Swedish during World War II because in fact he is German.
That's what I was.
And how do you know that too? His father was arrested at a Ku Klux Klan protest in Chicago. And one of Donald Trump's most popular and beloved books by him is Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler, famous speeches. And if you look through that book to the famous speeches that Adolf Hitler uses, that they're identical to the speeches that he uses, that Adolf Hitler used towards the Jews, are identical to the ones he's using toward the Muslims. How history repeats itself. And why did the people he not want to tell you that? It's for you to think about what are some of the stereotypes we have with Germans. But if I were to tell you that, it makes all sorts of sense now. A sense of superiority. It wasn't yesterday what he said is, we want the oil, we just go in there and get it. And people don't know is that in the Bible it talks about that the end of the world will occur in the Middle East. And what do the people in the Middle East say that they're most afraid of is? That we're going to come in and our idea is to destroy them and to take their oil. And when Donald said that, and what do you do when people believe you're going to destroy them? They're going to attack you. He just validated their deepest fears in one full sentence yesterday. And so today is we're watching polarization on our campuses, and everything they hear was going to come into your classrooms. What's out there is in here, and what it's here is out there. And that today, as we begin in having you in a circle, is to realize is, don't wait until someone gets shot at this school. Don't wait until the Black Lives Matter rears its head. How will you have the conversation today and now? What's hard about it and what's good about it. Now, what I'd like to do is do this, please, is I'd like to ask this gentleman back here. And I'd like you to turn around and take a good look at him. This is the first time I've seen him smile today. He was looking at me so seriously. Okay, and your name is?
Augustine.
Augustine?
Augustine.
Augustine, ooh, beautiful name.
Thank you.
And what does diversity mean to you?
Inclusivity to openness.
Inclusivity and openness. Oh, that's a really good one. And you're looking at me, what does diversity mean to you?
It's an assortment of differences in values, culture, beliefs.
Okay. And what does diversity mean to you?
An opportunity to learn more about the rich cultural diversity in life and perspectives.
Okay. And your name is?
Oscar.
Oh, that's right, still Oscar.
Still
Oscar, what does diversity mean to you?
I guess it means equal treatment for peoples of different ethnic backgrounds.
Okay, good. And what does diversity mean to you?
It means variety, and it's not.
Okay. And what does diversity mean to you?
For me, diversity is the different ways in which we express our sameness.
Okay. And your name is?
Gabriel.
Gabriel. Gabriel, what does diversity mean to you?
Difference.
Difference. Tell me what you mean by difference.
Different people with different value systems, different backgrounds, different, they were raised out differently, different economic backgrounds, histories in the family.
I knew he'd have a lot to say here. And what does diversity mean to you?
To me, diversity is more about a feeling of inclusiveness, not the way that it looks on the outside, but the way that people feel through space.
And your name is?
Edgar.
And Edgar, what does diversity mean to you?
People with different backgrounds.
Aha, good. And different backgrounds. And your name is?
Bernard.
Denard, hello
How are
again.
you?
And what does diversity mean to you?
Just a representation of the population.
Representation of the population. And let's ask the camera guy. He's going to be shocked I asked him. What does diversity mean to you?
Different people, different cultures.
Good. Different people, different cultures. Okay. So, what does diversity mean to you?
Diversity means differences in perspective, not only in skin color, but in mindset.
Okay. Raise your hand if you appreciate that I went around to get a chance to meet you. Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you appreciated what people said. Raise your hand if you kind of agreed with them that they did cover it, what diversity means. Good. So what if I told you for the past 7.3 minutes, because Asian people have good internal biological time, which makes them excellent mathematicians genetically from the very beginning of their lives. Okay, which I'm horrible at math. What if I told you in those 7.4 minutes that I have been purposefully and consciously practicing sexism? Please raise your hand if you saw me do it. Please stand. Please stand. And for the rest of you, I'm going to assume that you did not see me do anything that was sexist. Okay, so the rest of you will be taking the afternoon class on diversity, and the rest of you will have passed, okay? So Cicely, what is one thing you saw me do that was sexist?
It's Cecily. And
Just one thing.
one of the things is that you joked with the guys and not with the women.
Okay, not only did I not joke with any woman, I never once talked to any woman. I talked and engaged every single man and had a conversation. Not one single woman did I talk to. Please raise your hand if you did not notice that. Boy, some of you who might be head of women's studies are going to go, oh my God, I didn't see that. What is one more thing you saw me, please remain standing, one more thing you saw me do that was sexist?
Okay, you asked the guy's names.
Every single man I asked his name, not one single woman did I ask their names. Please raise your hand if you did not notice that. How much more blatant could I get? Now you're really going to start thinking is, what else did I do? Start us going like this. I could feel one more thing. What was one more thing you saw me do?
The thing that came up for me as we were just doing this was, we accept it. It's like,
Well, before we go into that part, we'll examine it. What else did you see me do that was sexist? Yes.
A couple of the men, I heard you comment on their statements.
Yeah, in other words, I engaged every man.
Like you said, good.
Right, but I never engaged a single woman. What else? By the way, I did 6 other things that were blunt and profound. So why don't you 3 stand up because you did see it and didn't stand. What is one thing you saw me do that was sexist?
At least with Jean, I saw you ask the question, and as she was answering, you were already walking away.
No, it's not just her. Every single woman, I walked away from them. I physically turned my body and walked away from every single woman that talked. Raise your hand if you did not see that. How much more blatant could I get? What else did I do that was sexist? And I need you all know this is being recorded. It will be used whether or not you get promoted. Yes, what is one thing you saw me do?
I believed you touched every single man.
Good, I touched every single man. Good, I did not touch a single woman because I never came up to them. Now let me tell you the most profound one I did. Not one single woman got the microphone. Every single man got the microphone. Please raise your hand if you did not see that. Edgar's going, I don't know if I should raise my hand or not here. How much more profound could I get? To not only don't even ask your name, don't even stay looking at you, don't comment, don't ask you anything else, and I actually literally walk away. And this was the experience of many women going to law school, in corporations, in which the men would say is, are you sure that really did happen to you? Really? Hillary, in that Matt Lauer recent interview, oh, the man interrupted you 3 times but never interrupted the man once. Stayed on one topic throughout the entire interview. But Donald Trump got to fill in anything he wanted, 5 or 6 different questions. Why did he get away with that? Did the man even notice that? How differently he treated the woman in the interview. And he kept calling Hillary on the emails, but not once confronted Donald on anything that he said. And one man wrote, which I thought was beautiful, is, whew, must be hard to be a woman and run for politics.
Yeah.
And if you didn't see that, you probably didn't see this. And so for those of you that are wondering how is subtle, is diversity discrimination, I was as blatant as I could and you didn't see it. Now the question becomes is this. For those of you that did see me do it, stand once again. Stand once again for those of you that did see me do it. Now why didn't you stop me? You're all professors. Come on. Why didn't you all, very strong women, why didn't you stop me? He said, I saw you do it, and I didn't want to create friction, or, it might be disrespectful, so it might come in your culture that you don't do that, or maybe even as women. Why else didn't you stop me? Why else didn't you stop me, Sheila?
I was second questioning myself.
Ding! Like Family Feud, that's the #1 answer. Discrimination, I strongly believe, is a betrayal. It's a betrayal of our senses, like, I did see that. They did say that to me. I did see it. That this is what you do, is you go back into yourself and you doubt what you just saw. And by the time you go through this whole litany of your list, was the way I dressed, was what I said, maybe I wasn't important, maybe it's the way I said it, maybe the way I looked, maybe the men were more interesting. You do all this in your head and it goes right by you. Why didn't you stop me, Starla? Because you don't look like somebody who let you get away with something like that.
I swear, I said, I'm used to this. I'm so used to it that I kind of like picked my battles and I was like, okay.
Ding, #2 answer. What's new?
Exactly.
That's what a woman said, what's new? And for people of color, what's new? What I want you to get in this room is this. What happens when you get a 22-year-old, 19-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old that goes, why try? What's new? That's when you start to go, oh my God, it starts so young. Or as the black student in my newest film, If These Halls Could Talk, says, those are college students talking about the state of racism on our campuses, said, look what they did to this president. What chance do I have? So make no mistake about it. When you kept silent in your classes, maybe, when as an institution you didn't come together to say something about the way he was treated or to talk about it, imagine the message that they pick up. Imagine every single day the internet, which I call both a blessing and a curse, every day they see it, they go, how come no one's saying anything about it? Colin Kaepernick speaks up. A new survey showed something like 80% of white people said he is unpatriotic, totally against it. Something like 80% of people of color think it's important. And today, the Seattle Seahawks, when they played, the entire team sat down. Police unions all over the country are saying, He's not respecting the flag. He's not respecting this. And not one single police union has brought up the killings of young black people and why people of color and blacks particularly are so upset. Not once. It's almost like they didn't say it. Like Kaepernick says, I love America. I just don't feel like we're all treated well, justly. And until the homicides and until all this gets investigated. But not one single police officer in America has brought it up that that's what they're talking about. And it's part of that amnesia, that selective amnesia, that becomes, what can I do about it? How can I get people to hear it? Why didn't you stop me?
I wasn't visually looking, and so I didn't see it happening until I saw you here. And you put your hand on him, and then I remembered you put your hand on him back there. And because I didn't see the rest of it, I wasn't sure.
And by the way, that's one of the reasons why when we set up our classrooms, we set up rows, and we don't even turn around when someone's talking. You ever have somebody do this? I totally disagree with the woman back there. I really feel like that's hating America. And you don't even get to turn around, look at the person. Happens all over the country. So I propose to you that actually, you're not used to turning around to look at somebody when they're talking. Not when you have rows. That's why the American Indians talk about circles. Look at the people. That's why that woman who had that whole classroom called Freedom Writers, nice thing to watch, but how many of you set up your classroom so students have to look at each other? Or do we set it up so they're all just looking at the front? That the front is the person who has all the answers, rather than you looking at each other. My largest audience was 14,000 people, public administrators from all over the world. And I said, I had 1 hour to talk, and every single person in that room had 6 minutes to talk. And all the women go, yeah, that's easy. And all the men go, that's statistically impossible. And women go, they would talk to each other. It didn't even occur to them because all the men thought that they would be talking to me up here as the expert. How does that model translate to us around the country is? Every single town hall meeting is talking to a panel. One microphone for 450 people from Ferguson and a whole panel of 7 white people sitting in the front, and we call that a dialogue. National Conversation on Race, everybody who's in that room is talking to a panel, but not one single person is talking to each other. So in other words, we aren't used to talking to looking at each other. We're used to looking at one person in the front. And today I'd like to propose to you that we will never get into this dialogue with each other. And I'm not here to talk about racism. I'm not here to talk about sexism. I want you to get to know each other in very intimate, authentic ways. Because unless you do, you will never be able to do it in your classroom with any sense of assurance. Because when I asked, by the way, I was an educator for 25 years. Administrator, counselor, as well as teaching. And not one day in my years of training was I prepared to have a dialogue on race, or sexism, homophobia. As a therapist, I was not trained either, though people assume we must be. One little class on multiculturalism, the history of Chinese, the history of blacks, but not really about how to have this. And so today is, raise your hand if you would like to have that conversation, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you're a little bit scared about it. Someone once said that every day we tell 26 lies. Wonder how many we told already this morning. Because there's a Chinese statue that looks like this. I want to hear the truth, but not too much. I want to hear the truth, but not if it gets emotional or angry. I want to hear the truth, but not if it means it involves me. And that's really what she's talking about, isn't she? Is how much will the person up here also engage and be transparent? I'm going to tell you that I'm a recovering racist, and I'm a recovering sexist, I'm a recovering homophobic, a recovering classist, because I've been bombarded daily with all these stereotypes I have to fight every single day. And so every time someone points out sexism, I go, Damn, why didn't I see it? So I'd like to propose to you, you can beat yourself up, but you have picked up, and everything you hear Donald Trump saying, he heard from someplace else. This whole thing about, if you don't love this country, leave it. And I bet you he believes he made that up. And we used that throughout the 60s. I don't know how many high school teachers I hear say that. I made it up. Like, wow, really? You made that up. Or maybe even this one. I don't see color. Like you think you made that one up. I may say racist things, that doesn't mean I'm a racist. I love everybody. I never met anybody who loved everybody. I know people who don't even love their partners that much every day. You ever hear how this one is? I don't see difference. And why can't we just all be the same? And by the way, how many children do you have?
2.
Are they alike? So why do we assume that our children aren't even alike, and not even our partners are alike, but we assume our whole room is alike? Isn't that amazing? We can't seem to be able to handle and deal with difference. And so today is, you're going to turn and face your partner. Turn and face your partner. Turn your chairs and face your partner. Now, the reason why I want you to look at each other is, I personally believe what my students said in my newest film, they walk into a classroom and everybody's in groups. And this is what the teacher says. Hi everybody. Now, I'm really going to hope that some of you will get to meet each other during the year. Okay, turn to page 42. And the only time they come together is at a project. Jesse Jackson was dead wrong. The most segregated time in America is not on Sunday. It's at lunchtime. Raise your hand if you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just look at your campus, come on. And if you've never gone into your campus to look at the lunchtime, watch them. And how are they going to, do you really think a person watching a whole group eating lunch and who might be a totally different ethnic group will go like this? Hi, can I join you? When would that happen? Or maybe, you ever watch the inside group? Do they ever go like this? Hey, come on over here and join us. No. They're all with their own little group. And so what happens is, how do you do that? And today we're going to learn, how do you begin that conversation with each other? And you can ask me tons of questions today to answer all your questions, but we're going to get down where you do it actually yourself. Okay? That's what I'm going to have you do. How many of you have assumptions of all different groups? Raise your hand. Assumptions that you've heard or learned. Raise your hand. Good. So I'd like to propose to you, we have assumptions all the time. In fact, I can guarantee you have tons of assumptions of me when I walked in. And I'll bet you, some of you thought, oh, he's into martial arts. Raise your hand. I bet that guy can't drive. So some of you going, I don't know about that one. Okay. All right, so you have all of those, right? And I don't know how many students, when I walk into classrooms, go like this. Huh! You know? That's exactly what happened when I went to Hunters Point to teach. A little 8-year-old kid did that in front of me. And I looked at him and I went, not bad, grasshopper. I'll teach you some more moves after school. Okay? So I'd like to propose you all have them from each other, okay? This is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to take a look at your partner's shoes, sandals, or whatever they're wearing. Don't say anything, just look at them. Take a good look. Now take a look at where they have a skirt, pants, or whatever. Don't look at me, look at your part. Keep looking. Check them out. I think we're scared to check each other out. And I always check out with Denard. This time, first time he's had socks on when I worked with him. we used to always do workshops and he didn't wear socks, and I said, as an Asian man, I could never get away with that. Okay. Now, take a look at the jewelry that they have on. Take a look at their rings, earrings. See, you've been checking those out, but you just didn't look carefully enough. Necklaces. Now take a look at what kind of top they're wearing, the colors they have on, any words that are on their shirts or anything like this. Take a good look at them. I'll take a look at their hair, eyes. No, it's too late to fix your hair. Take a good look. Just notice what it's like to actually look at somebody rather than sneak a look. Do you ever be in an elevator and it kind of looks like this? Well, kids do that all the time. And they've learned how to do it to not look at people, but see them as a group. Interesting, huh? When I was working with 75 administrators in Portland, Oregon, and I said, write down on a piece of paper a group that you're scared about. And what did they write down? A group of Latinos and a group of 3 or more. And I said, what happens when Latinos and Mexicanos are in a group of 3 or 4? They said, well, they're up to no good. And I said, so what do you do when you see Latinos in a group of 3 or 4? They said, I send one of the teachers of color to break them up. And they had all written this in and did not even know that they had all been having that fear. And then I asked some of the people of color, what did it feel like for you to have to go over and break that group up? And they said, I was so angry. But I knew he was the principal of the ministry. I had to do it. Doing things they did not want to do. So where did they get all of these stereotypes from? And even though you don't have those stereotypes, what do you think your students have? When every day they look on television, every day they hear the Donald talk about some other group again. Or the governor of Arizona can say, it's Latinos who are cutting the head off of white people in Arizona. Those are the illegals. Or John McCain can say, it's the illegals who started the big fire in Arizona. And when the police chiefs heard the governor say that, they went, when did that happen? And then she just walked away. When they asked John McCain, Senator John McCain, where did you find out that there was an illegal immigrant who started the Arizona fire? He goes, well, somebody said it to me. And the moment it goes onto the air, whoo, people go, you see what they did in Arizona? It becomes fact. And they walk into your classroom, they look at Latinos. And I can guarantee you Latinos and Mexicanos have had this happen to them tons of times. You got a green card? Are you an alien?
Matter of fact,
Are you
yes.
illegal?
No.
He'll make a joke about it, which is what we learned how to do. You don't know how many students have told me they've had this experience. How many Muslims have had people walk up to them and go, are you a terrorist? You know, after Timothy McVeigh blew up the federal building, I walked up to every white person and I said, are you a terrorist? Are you a terrorist? And I was thinking we ought to narrow the amount of Scottish, Irish people in the United States because they could be a terrorist group. Or when a white person shot up Charlottesville, the church in Charlottesville. Woo! White people always into crime. Did we think that? No, we looked into an empathetic, sympathetic background of the white person. Not that they were an animal, not that they were a whole group, just simply an individual. And how do you think that imprints? That every time we see a black person, they've got to be an animal, vicious, violent, and it's a whole group. And that imprints on our students, it imprints on you, it imprints on families, and how you look at them. Raise your hand if you know exactly what I'm talking about. Raise your hand. That's why you need to talk about it in your classrooms, because that internet is giving them thousands of images that they absolutely believe is the absolute truth. Now, what I'd like you to do when you're looking at your partner is this. I would like you to tell your partner, you're going to start off, I'm just going to do this. Your first name again is Oscar, right? So you can look at Oscar and you say, well, Oscar, one assumption I made about you is that you might be athletic, okay? And you're wondering what sport you're in. And then Oscar will say, well, yeah, I am into running or whatever that might be, okay? Or it might be say you look at Cicely, you might go, so Cicely, I think, Cecily, is that I think maybe blue is one of your favorite colors. I don't know about that. And just wondering that about you, and you seem very smart. So she might respond back with I hate blue. This is all the clothes I had today before I took it to the cleaners. Or whatever that might be. It says, I love blue, or whatever that might be. But you also want to start looking at the ones you're afraid to say, okay? So you might be looking at start and going, okay, you're really heavily into your culture. You're really a liberal, or whatever that might be. I bet you're a social activist. So you get to check out with her if any of that's true or not. Because there was a time, wasn't there, when you wore this. You would be seen as a liberal, an activist, somebody who's really into Africana studies, all this kind of stuff that goes on in your head. So all this could be operated. And now you get to find out if it's true or not. Can you hear that? You get to find out if it's true or not. Or as Denard and I went to Disney World, huh? This very famous one that, oh, by the way, Denard is also one of my trainers. We went to Disney World, and I forget, it was Disneyland or Disney World, and he talked about his hair. And so how many of you thought he was great? And they all raised their hands. How many of you would hire me? And the truth of it is, you cannot have hair like Denard's and be hired by Disney Studios. Did you not know that? Raise your hand. And Ross Perot, who ran for the presidency of the United States, you would automatically not be able to be hired, Judy, because you are wearing things on your body that are ethnic. And in Ross Perot's company, you cannot wear anything that's ethnic on your body to be an employee of Ross Perot's company. Raise your hand if you did not know that. And by the way, women would never be allowed to wear pants. They have to wear a dress every day. They cannot allow to wear pants no matter what the weather is in Ohio. Raise your hand if you did not know that. Yeah. And so all of this is right sitting here, isn't it? So the person is going to start, you're going to do number 1 together, number 2 assumption, then check it out, and number 3. So you should have at least 3 assumptions looking at your partner. Now, I know you just might be scared to tell them what your assumption is. Don't worry, you get to get back at them with your assumption, okay? All right. And the only way you're going to break assumptions is to check it out, okay? The person who will start will be the person with the shortest hair. Ready, begin. All right, we have to measure your 2 here. So, how many of your assumptions were right? Some of your assumptions were right? How many of you were a little bit nervous to tell your partner your assumptions? Why were you nervous?
Don't want to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
Rub anybody the wrong way.
Yeah, so what ends up is that we don't say anything, but we think it. So a person comes in and we go, huh, Middle Eastern person, maybe they're not that smart. Maybe their education was inferior. And so you don't get the promotion, but we don't check it out. Same thing with blacks and Asians, right? We assume the Asians must be really smart, responsible, trustworthy, all the things, we got all these accolades without any people knowing it. I remember one storekeeper said to me across the street from our school, he said, I only allow 1 black kid in at a time because they steal. And I said, I know. My students tell me that when a black student comes into your store, he was Vietnamese, you follow them all around. The other students love it because the Asians and white students get to steal everything you have. And they were coming out giving out candy to the kids. I said, how did that happen? And so we pick up these stereotypes, and the truth of it is, until we find out and check them out, we'll always carry them, won't we? And that's what happens is we become afraid to ask. By the way, as a therapist, I can tell you as a family therapist is, one of the biggest things between couples is how to be able to communicate and to be unconditionally accepting and being with another person who's different than you. And by the way, how many of you believe that relationships take work? How many of you have kids? It takes work. So by the way but we avoid it, diversity issues particularly, if we just might say something wrong. Well, the odds are really good because we have 500 years of don't ask, don't tell. So what do you think, you're going to get it right the first time? And by the way, if you don't get it right, you think it's going to kill me? If you really think something you say will be the worst thing I've ever experienced in terms of racism, I've got something to tell you. Yeah, some people say, oh my God, it would destroy you if I said this. I said, try it. Because the truth of it is, we heard from somebody. I don't want to hurt them again. Well, we're hurt every day. The work is whether or not you're going to stay in there. Just like Cecily said to me, how about what you think? You see, if she held it all in, she'd be bursting. But when she told me, it's a sign is how I take it in, but also along with it is how many of your students, how many of your colleagues can say is, I don't like what you said. I disagree with what you said. I have a totally different perspective. But we hold it in. And I strongly believe that after a while, it builds up. And by the way, do not be mistaken. Mesa College is no more exempt from violence happening on campus. It's happening all around you. And every single campus, every single neighborhood said, I can't imagine it would have happened here. But don't be like Virginia Tech, where I'm going there in December doing. How do they handle violence? Everyone's armed. How smart.
What could happen?
Whew, what could happen? All the shooter has to go is like this. Come in with his gun, bam, 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 he's got a gun. And everybody thinks that's the shooter. And who does SWAT team do? Shoot when they come in? Anyone who's shooting. And we are waiting for that to happen. And make no mistake, everybody, is this. One day when it's your child, when it's your colleague, maybe then you'll go, why didn't we talk about this? Because when we don't, students think, let's just get a gun. There are more gunshots than there are schools today. And most people don't know that when President Barack Obama got elected president, for the first time in the history of the United States, we ran out of ammunition. Most people don't realize that. And so today is when we begin to talk, is how much are you going to get to know this person more? So let's get a little deeper. Take a good look what's on the screen. Would you mind reading that, Starla?
Curiosity is the gateway to empathy.
I will guarantee you that in the presidential debates, you will not see one single candidate ask the other person a question because they want to know. Not one single candidate will do this. So what I heard you say is that I'd make a horrible president. Tell me why. They will learn to be adversarial, defensive, or in denial, or what I call the Sarah Palin template. You'll have 10 answers for any question. Isn't that amazing? And she had it all written on her hand, except she started sweating and it became more difficult to read. And you may laugh, but she got away with it because a number of times I could not tell if she answered it or not. It was so, I felt like I was at a Miss Universe contest. An answer for every situation that might happen in America. And so today is curiosity. You need to start working with your students on and yourself is, what are some questions you could ask to be curious? And that little card you got, if you pull it out, called The Art of Mindful Inquiry, and it looks like this, all different colors. It's called The Art of Mindful Inquiry. And by the way, I did it all in different colors because we talk about multiculturalism and we print everything in white. It's amazing. Now, those are questions that you could ask. And by the way, would you read the very first one, please? Could you read number 1?
What I heard you say was...
Good. And by the way, this is simply a reflection. And I guarantee you will not see one single candidate reflect back what the other person said. So what do we teach? Dysfunctional communication, attack, defend, be in denial, or the real famous one that keeps happening is just don't say anything, like they didn't say anything, and change the topic. And by the way, I want you to think about how many times a student in your class could say something, or a colleague in a meeting, and no one says anything, you simply go on to the next topic. What do you teach people is, you don't have to answer them. And guess what else? I guarantee you, the person who's talking that watches no one say anything will never talk again. Or the students will learn, don't ever take a chance in class and say something out in the open. Yeah. Silence is dysfunctional communication. When a person says something, say something back. So I've been doing that with lots of folks all the time. When I have lots of my friends just don't say anything, I said, what do you think about what I said? And I had one law professor said, I don't know. And I said, that's a white privilege to say I don't know and get away with it. And then he goes, okay, I'm afraid to get emotional because of what I heard. I said, I'll survive, tell me. Or one man said, okay, I'll be honest. I didn't hear a thing you said. And I said, I knew that. That's why I called on you. Because you were going like this, and I hadn't said anything yet. Next one.
Tell me more about what you meant by...
Ooh, I like this one because you can go on a whole date, first date on this one. Tell me more, instead of talking about yourself. And by the way, most of the time, and Denard will tell you, I use those two almost all the time. And I get a person to talk. No matter what the topic, no matter how traumatized they are, I could tell them, so what I heard you say is, you felt invisible. And by the way, right at my hotel, every single time at a hotel, I don't know what keeps happening. Every time I'm on an airplane, here I was, standing waiting to get off the airplane. And this white guy does to me, he goes, just runs into me to get his luggage. Just knocks me over. Doesn't say excuse me. It's almost like I wasn't even there. And then when he grabs his luggage, now I being a nice Asian guy, I helped him with his luggage. And I swear to you, I wanted to say to him, this is the part when you say excuse me and thank you. But there was some part of myself that went, I don't know if I want to spend the time to do a diversity workshop at this hour. How many of you know exactly what I'm talking about? Do I do it again? Do I educate you? And then more than likely, or as this one woman said to me, when I gave her a plate, I looking right at her, and she gives me this scowl, because we were, you know, one of those buffet things they have. I just gave her the styrofoam plate. And then she doesn't say a word, and I said, this is the part where you say thank you. And I'm looking right at her this whole time. She goes, I did. And I kept thinking, did I not see it? Did she say it internally? And that's where I started doubting my reality. And then if I said, she didn't say hello, I'm sure her husband would say, yes, she did. I heard her. And then I'd go, what the hell am I doing this for? The truth is, I wanted to throw all the plates at her. But I just started to realize, was I invisible? And I started going, what did I do that caused her to do all this? And I want you to keep thinking about that. How many women who have been at the brunt of Donald Trump going, but answer my questions, answer what I said. Instead, their appearance, their age, everything gets dumped on them. What does that feel like? To feel like a person's not answering what your concerns are. And the next one, Eileen?
What angered you about what happened?
My supervisor once said, the way to tame a wild bull is to give it a wider field. I went, what? That opened up my whole world. Give it a wider field? What did that mean, Eileen?
I don't know. I think that's pretty risky to me.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question. When you're really pissed at your partner, do you want him to shut you up, or do you want to be able to express it?
Oh, I want to express it.
There you
but I
go.
wasn't raised to do that. So.
Yeah, but you feel it.
Yes.
See how the way she said it? There's so many times I wanted to say something to him. Okay? She might even go into therapy or talk to a girlfriend or a boyfriend about that, to talk about it. But the truth of it really is, if it builds up, that's why people pick up guns. Because their hurt and their anguish is so intense. So what that taught me, Starler, was, what would it be like if I actually did hear them out? And in my film, how many of you seen my film, The Color of Fear? How many have not seen it? You should get out more often. And by the way is, how many of you have been taught that when a black man gets angry, it might mean danger, violence, abuse? Yeah. And for those of you that have not raised your hands, how many images do you see daily on that? That it could be dangerous. And I want you to look at Denard. At the moment I said that, he went like this. Or in the film Last Chance for Eden, he says, if I see a woman on the side of daylight on the side of the, outside of the road that needs help, I may or may not touch her, but there could be stop. But at night, definitely not, because of what that could mean. And I remember Victor Lewis, who's the star of one of my films, If the Color of Fear. We got lost in Tahoe. We were all going to be going up there for a retreat for something, and it was late at night. We got lost, and I said, "Hey, let's go up and find out directions." He goes, "You go," and I went, "What?" He goes, "No, you go, because you won't get shot walking up to the house." What was that all about? And the stories that are sitting in this room. Well, the one that I didn't do this morning is, how did the students learn about racism? They said their parents didn't have to say a single word. And they said they learned about racism in a movie theater. Parents all sitting there, just like my parents. Oh, a black person sat, you should have seen my father. It was almost like there was a killer next to him. It was like this. And he'd go like this and look at us like this. Then he'd move over like this. Then if he had a bag of food, which we always try to save money, and bring our own food. Some people can relate. And so what happens, he would grab the bag of food and move it over here for fear they would get stolen. My father never did that when a white person sat next to us. What did I learn? He didn't say a single word to me, did he? Or maybe this one. Honey, kids, roll the windows up, lock the doors. And then I looked out to what neighborhood he was talking about. That's how the students learned. And then when they come to school, they see those kids. Raise your hand if you've been taught in this fair city what areas not to go to that are too dangerous. Raise your hand. Every city's got them. And those people are sitting right here. Yeah. And they carry that when they meet you. Teachers carry that when they see those group of students. Whew. All you have to do is watch a whole group of students, whether it be black or Latino, and watch teachers walk by and they're nervous. They'll even sometimes go across the lawn when they see people. Raise your hand if you know exactly what I'm talking about. Physically avoiding you. And when they see you do that, they begin to notice, ooh, it must be something to be afraid of. That's why what angered you is important to hear it. Better to hear it in a classroom than have someone act it out because they cannot hold it in any longer. That's what your job could be, is to hear the anguish of what it feels like. And the next one, please, is in the pink.
What hurt you about what happened?
I do not believe that anger is a primary emotion. I think hurt is. When hurt is unacknowledged or invalidated, it becomes anger. Yeah. So think about that. You will never get to the hurt unless you're willing to hear the anger. That's what I would like to encourage you to do that. I think there's so much anguish being built up in this country because the hurt is so unacknowledged and invalidated. It's been building up. And by the way, African American men have the highest blood pressure of any ethnic group in the United States because they've been holding so much into it. And what happens when an African American woman like Michelle Obama has a big, long voice, then suddenly she's militant. And all she did was say, when her husband was running for the presidency of the United States, I felt racism at Princeton. And by the way, I just got back from Princeton. They were pissed when she said that. But by the way, not one reporter or person at Princeton asked her what was her experience. And about 3 or 4 years ago, her roommate came forth who was white, and what she said was, I remember the day I came with my white parents to Princeton, and there was Michelle Obama putting her books on the shelf. Hi, my name is Michelle, I'm your roommate. And the father stepped in front of his daughter and went like this. I would not allow my daughter to room with a N word. What are N people here doing in Princeton anyway? And that was Michelle Obama's first day. And when a reporter went up to Michelle Obama and asked her that her roommate had made this interview and her husband was president, it was after his first term, Michelle looked out a window and without saying a word just said, with tears in her eyes, no comment. We had successfully shut up the First Lady so that she wouldn't answer that, because she was afraid it would harm her husband if she talked about it. So what did we relegate her to? Organic gardening. Woo! Just loves what she wears. Obesity. Just as long as she doesn't bring up the R word. Make sure this president doesn't bring it up. The only time he really did it, last term. But boy, we missed a chance to get to learn. We just were too scared to find out. And the next one, Monica?
What's familiar about what happened? How did that affect you? How does it affect you now?
And this is what I call the past tense question. I believe this country is preoccupied thinking that when you and I have an issue around diversity, It's happening right now. I would like to propose to you that sexism, racism, homophobia, classism, etc., it's just the tip of the iceberg when you start to talk about it. When she was getting upset with me, it wasn't happened today. This wasn't the first experience she's had. It's like how many other times she's had to live with it. Maybe couldn't say anything about it. And we don't necessarily want to ask her what's familiar about what Benoit did. What's familiar about what you saw in the room, huh, Starlet? And how did that affect you? And how does it affect you today? And remember what you said was, what's new? But even more importantly, when she says what new is, I'm not getting into this. Or what she says is, it just might create something. What she also is saying to you that she's not saying is, if I were to bring up something, would it get resolved? Or would I just be seen as a troublemaker? Just bringing up stuff. And would they really want to hear me, what I had to say? And the last one, please.
What do you need, want?
What do you need or want? And I believe we go to that one so we can skip all the ones above. And it kind of sounds like this. Okay, Oscar, what do you need or want now? And you know that you just want to get you out of the office. Raise your hand if you know exactly what I'm talking about, that one. Getting into solutions so we can get you out of the room. Okay. So this is the basic ones that I'm teaching you. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because 2 months before I was to retire from teaching, a student put a chair up against my door. And I barely heard it. It came up against my head and went like this. I'm going to kill you, Mr. Lee. How many of you would like to know how I got out of that room? Raise your hand. You should buy my book over here. Denard's going, oh, I knew he was going to use that joke again. But I use these questions, by the way. So if people are traumatic, having trauma, conflict, try these out. And by the way, it works on my own son most of the time. Okay. So what I'd like you to do now is we're going to get down with each other, okay? Remember, part of the title of this workshop is how to create community, okay? First one is, when people talk to you about an equal playing field is, what happens if you equally risk? Can you hear that? You really take a chance to get to know each other, which means to drop from your normal professional relationship you have to one that you really get to know each other. I thought there was a bird in here. Okay, so here we go, and this is the question that you're going to be answering. Share an experience or person who deeply affected who you are today. Share how and why. Take a good look. And by the way, one of the things I did was I shared that my father deeply affected me more than any other person because he was both physically and verbally abusive. So he definitely affected me deeply who I became. So it doesn't always have to be a person who's a positive experience, but someone who might have a negative experience in your life, but that also deeply affects your life. Okay? Take a good look. Now what I'd like you to do is this. Do not decipher one that, oh, that's too personal, to a nice lightweight one, okay? I will guarantee you this. If you really want to have a more honest relationship that's real, one of you has got to drop. So it's not about, oh, we went to Italy and it deeply affected, I just love travel, okay? So let's get rid of that one, okay? Let's get down to one that people don't get to see or know about you up front. Can you hear that? How many of you are willing to get more intimate with that story? Raise your hand. Good. Okay. So what you're going to do is the person with the longest hair is going to start this time. And I know you two have worked that out. Okay, now totally turn and face your partner. No 45-degree angles. And what you're going to do is, after they get done telling their story, then you get to tell yours too, okay? You get 10 minutes to do this, for both of you to tell your story, all right? Ready, begin. So now what I'd like you to do is look back at your partner. Don't look at me. Look at your partner. What I'd like you to do is, don't look at me, look at your partner. Are you going to turn into soy sauce, okay? All right. So look at your partner. And what I'd like you to do, and this is part of mindfulness, look at your partner.
I have it in my partner.
Look back at your partner. This is on purpose. Is now start to just remember, don't look at me, look at your partner. For some of you have a hard time looking at your partner. Now what I'd like you to do is think of 2 or 3 things that your partner said that you just appreciate. Just allow yourself to feel what your partner said. I would like to propose to you that part of what mindfulness is about is not right after your partner talks, you talk, which is what we're so used to in this culture. But what would it be like to take in what they've said? As a therapist, sometimes I'll just go like this. Aha, that'll be $50 more. Thank you. But really, that pausing, it shows that you're really being present with them, and they might want to say more, but to allow it to be touched. I think we're afraid of silence in this culture. Like we fill it up with anything. So don't look at me, look at your partner still. So now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to tell your partner what you appreciated about what they shared with you. Can you hear that? What you appreciated about what they shared. Ready, begin. Okay, so the reason why I had you appreciate each other is I want you to think about this. Did you appreciate them because their story you could relate to? And if you couldn't relate to it, could you still appreciate their story? You see, I don't believe our country is multicultural. I think we're multiracial. Multicultural means that you integrate and find my culture useful to you. You see, I think what we do in this country, it's not really assimilation, it's accommodation. I think that as long as I accommodate to a white, male, heterosexual, middle-class culture, you'll like me. In fact, you'll promote me. In fact, if I don't bring it up, I could be Clarence Thomas too. You'll make me the Supreme Court Justice. Multiculturalism is about that if I tell you the way I do leadership, the way I do conflict is different, that you'll go like this. I never thought about that. That would be really useful to use in our workplaces, in therapy, in business, in education. You see, one of the things that I've noticed in this country is when women came into the workplace, we did like this. Woo, good to have some women here. Okay, let's get to work. What we didn't do was, I'd like to learn from you as a woman how you would do this differently. And not only that, how we could change the way we do our work. I really want to know. You see, I think that's what the Black Lives Matter is trying to say to us is, pay attention. You see, we're just so caught up with, once again, is they've interrupted our meeting. And what I say is, why couldn't they have done that in their classroom? Why couldn't they have done it in their community? And when we didn't hear them there, what part of them then felt like the only way we could express ourselves is to do this? The other part is that I strongly believe that I have colluded in the violence of this country. And I started wondering, people ask, well, how did that happen? The number one bullier in our country on the internet is white adolescent girls. And when they were interviewed, why do you bully? In fact, they have accounted for 26 girls to have committed suicide by what they said, which was this, if those of you don't even want to look at the internet, because it's so negative. But you don't even know what's going on. And those 26 girls were told, die! Kill yourself! You're ugly! You don't belong here! Nobody likes you! Give yourself up to death dying. And when one of the girls hung herself, it was right on Newsweek. if you didn't bother to read that. And on the day she hung herself, it's because these bulliers, 4 of them, followed her home like they did every single day when she had lunch, is take her tray and throw it on her. On the last day, they followed her home and threw beer and called her all sorts of names and spit on her. She went home and hung herself. And did the school talk about it? No. They went ahead with the school dance. But 2 days after she hung herself, a number of students put on her Facebook, "Mission accomplished." Now, where did they learn that word from? And at the school dance, because the school didn't talk about it, want to cancel it, the students went around with nooses around their necks mimicking her. How many of you did not know that story? And right here in Southern California, at one of these major colleges here, 2 college students got up from the university and said this: she did it to herself. And I looked at them and I said, "Where'd you hear that from?" They said, "What do you mean?" I said, "No, where'd you hear it from?" And they didn't know that I had listened to Fox News that day. Because Fox News had the parents of the kids who were bullying. And the parents said on the news, she didn't have to hang herself, that was her decision. And so they simply picked it up and interpreted that as she did it to herself. See what I mean? You don't talk about it. They interpret the truth in a way that works for them. And guess how many friends they must have told that? She was stupid and did it to herself, rather than taking a look at their responsibility. Or maybe, as one American Indian woman said, is, no, we didn't call more police when we saw things going on in Littleton, Colorado. We looked at each other and said this at our school: how are we like Littleton, Colorado? Willingness to take a look at themselves. Almost every college where they had a shooting said it could never happen here. We just love each other. By raise of hands, how many of you believe that racism is alive and well here at college, Mesa College? How many of you believe that sexism is alive and well here at Mesa College? How many of you believe that sexual harassment is alive here at Mesa College? How many of you actually know some of the people that do all these things? So you just got a free cultural assessment. You didn't have to pay $2,000 for it, $20,000. And maybe the work is, now what are you going to do about it? And that's the part when I saw Starla take a breath and go like this. Right. You see that? She's been here long enough. You could see the look on their faces. Because I was here 20 years ago. Same issues were coming up. That's how I met Dinar. Yeah. I just got reminded of that. Denard had been stopped countless times coming to teach on this campus. And at one time he was taken down to the station. And one thing he said to me is, I'm here because I don't know what I'm going to do the next time a cop stops me. And I want to be able to find a way to do it differently. That's why I want to follow you, Manuel. And he was teaching here. And I have read Denard's emails to me, given all that's been going on in the country. I could hear his tears and see them and feel them through the emails. And on top of that, sometimes is, I don't know if I ever want to do this work again. And then to see him back today again. Because I didn't tell you that my newest film, just done 6 years ago and came out, and the star of my film said, the African American student says, at any given moment, I could lose my life. And 2 days after the premiere in Oakland, California, the Ku Klux Klan found him and burned him alive in his trunk. And I looked at my students who were in the cast, and I could tell the look in their eyes was, how could this happen? That's why I'm here. And when you see him on screen, you'll go, oh, he was so bright and so smart. And if these halls could talk, after 30 years of filming is my last film. Because I'm going to be doing a national conversation on race right into the heart of Ferguson. Right into Charlottesville. Doing what you're going to be doing in just a few moments. Not a lecture. I'm not going to answer all the questions. I'm going to have people pair up. Police officers are going to come without their uniforms, with their families, and pair up with someone who they've been scared to talk with their whole lives, and to begin these kind of questions. I don't think of a different way to do it than just doing it in front of somebody. And take a look at Kim and Denard as they're holding hands. Take a good look. Take a turn around look. And sometimes you're holding on for dear life. And what do students say to me why they want to have a teacher of color? Is so they could cry in their arms. So they could tell them how angry they feel and be understood why. Or as one black administrator said to me at Virginia Tech, what's wrong with being the only black student in the room? I said, maybe you've said that because not one single person has ever asked you, what's it like to be the only black person on this inclusive committee for 10 years? How anyone's ever asked you, what's it like to be the only person of color out of 30 people? So after a while, you think it's not even important. And what good would it be to say something? And as you take a look at some of the young people in this room crying and the tears going on, because they know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm here today because I didn't think really when I came out with my film in 1995 that I would still have to keep doing this 30 years later. And I've never seen this country so pulled apart. I never thought a person could run for the presidency of the United States saying what he did and have 14 million people think he's a god. 30% of which said of his group, we should never free the slaves. And I keep thinking, God, there's so much work to do. So that's why we're doing this exercise today. Because someday your life's going to depend on it and your students. To have some hope. Why did I have you do this particular exercise and acknowledge each other? Because I think we can't jump right into talking about diversity. You've got to have some connection with somebody. How many of you felt more connected to this person after they got a chance to share with you? Raise your hand. So now you've learned something about them, huh? Now, let's go deeper with them. And this is an exercise which I wrote called What We Do Not See. And by the way, I did this exercise at the United States military installation in Virginia, of all places. And since that was 2.5 years ago, schools, corporations, governments have said that they think this is probably one of the most incredible exercises to open up what it's like. This is what I wished all my life I would have been asked as a student when I was going to college. By the way, I was voted the most outstanding graduate of San Francisco State University, but I still felt they never wanted to know these questions. When others look at you, what do they see? I wish I could have said to them, as a Chinese man in all these counseling classes and education, I did not feel seen. I did not feel that any of my case studies had anybody to do with me, and I didn't feel I learned any therapeutic or educational techniques that were related to my culture. And nor was I ever asked. And I teach very differently than a white person does, or Latino, or Mexican. And I wondered if anybody ever would have noticed. So as a Chinese man, when others look at you, what do they see is what I would have answered. So yours might be as German, or Italian, or Polish, or Latina, or black. When others look at you, what do they see? Woo! This next one is, what don't they see and why? I think that's why we have to keep getting PhDs. Or, as the black student says in my newest film, this is the only place where I could be heard without a PhD. And even if you get a PhD, they wonder, what college did you get it from? And even if you're the President of the United States. This is what Donald Trump said when Barack Obama ran for the presidency of the United States. Can I see his homework? I heard he was the editor for the Harvard Review. I don't think he was smart enough. Can I see his homework? What an insult. And then he held up his birth certificate. I got mine. Where's his? And then the United States Census Bureau sent Donald Trump a letter and said, that's not a legal document that you held up. And not one single reporter in the United States asked to see his birth certificate. And most people don't know that when John McCain ran against Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, or Senator Barack Obama at that time, that Senator McCain was not born in the United States. Raise your hand if you did not know that. God, a lot of things you don't know here at Mesa. So how did he get to run for the presidency of the United States if he was not born here? In Panama. And when Senator Barack Obama was given that information, here, use it against him, he said, no way. That is not pertinent. He's an American. I wonder if Donald would have used that against him, the way he used it against Ted Cruz. And what did he say? Well, he needs a good American lesson is, Ted Cruz is not an American. Oh, yes, he is. He's in the same continent. Oh, I see. The only Americans are in the United States. Not one single person corrected him. He got away with it again. Interesting, isn't it? So what don't they see and why? Next one. What do you wish that they would see and why? Whew. You go all day, huh? All these things that are hidden. See how Starla's laughing is? And I bet you sometimes people have to work on it 24/7. Just like I was working with a group of interns at UC Berkeley who were psych interns. It was 94 degrees in this room. And this one black guy, this one Latino guy is wearing a suit and a tie. And the one white guy is wearing a t-shirt and shorts. And I tell the Latino guy, I said, you can loosen your tie, take your jacket off. It's really hot. And he goes like this. And when I start talking, as I usually do, then finally goes, okay, I'll tell you why I'm wearing my suit. Why do you think he's wearing his suit?
The same reason why I was dressed the same way. My mom and father always told me that you have to do better than your white counterparts, because otherwise we're not going to take you seriously. So when you leave this house, you dress not just for you, but you dress for us.
Notice that she's nodding too. Your name again is?
Selah.
Selah? Shayla? Selah?
Sakina.
Sakina. How many of you know them? Well, you guys ought to get out more often. Yes?
We work together, Selah and I do.
Good. So did you know that that's why they dress every day like this?
No, I didn't.
How does it feel like for you to hear what they just said? Telling you this. And by the way, they're just doing it because we're here now, huh? And I brought it up. And what would it mean if you dressed down? What would people think of you?
I wouldn't be taken as seriously, that they wouldn't take my words as valid because they already see this. So I'm already losing validation because of that. And then my clothing on top of that, oh, she really doesn't know anything.
And what part of that could you relate to?
Well, what she said almost, I think that we're talking about the same thing. It's almost as we can be accepted if we look more like we belong in that culture that we were.
Or as my nudist student said, as long as we dress like them. And I said, who's them? Oh, you know those people. Who are those people? And eventually she says, white people. As long as we look like them. And by the way, I could not go to any interview in any corporation in the United States wearing this, even though it's the clothing of my people. Yes?
Also, what resonated with me is the ageism aspect. As a younger professor, I didn't fit the mold of looking old enough, perhaps, to be a professor.
And then when you get too old, get killed on the other end. As many of you could relate. And by the way, there's one paper that I have out called The Voices in the Workplace. Too old and too young. So you better stay forever in the middle. And what do we do in our culture? You work like hell to make that face look young forever. You ever watch some of these newscasters, you're going, woo, what are they working on today? Yeah. Get rid of that accent. So you get all of them having that perfect English accent. So you can't even, but of course, if you have an Australian, English, or French accent, that's beautiful. But if you have a German, Japanese, Chinese, Mexican, Russian accent, you better get rid of it if you want to become a newscaster. It's funny how this society makes sure it gives you a constant message of who's acceptable and who's not. Next question is, would you read that one out, please? Gabriel?
If others wanted to see the real you, what do you need or want from them for that to happen?
Yes, take a look when he says that. You see, sometimes we walk up to people who are different. I want to get to know you. Woo, not knowing all the experience that you have to go through, huh? That goes, I'm going to protect myself. Do I know you? All of that's going on. Or maybe what's going on in Hawaii today, huh?
I know.
Yes, it's all over Hawaii. We want our land back. And if you don't know that, how deeply that affects him. You could see that in his eyes. Because that's exactly what happened to the American Indians. How many of you know that a lot of the land of the United States, the American Indians leased to the United States government? Raise your hand if you knew that. And that they owed us literally, we owed them literally billions. And just started this year, the Indians said, forget it. Because the Senate tried to pass, can we start the interest on the loan now? That's like you putting your money away for 30 years. So can we start the interest now? They even had the audacity to say that to the American Indians. And year after year, they have not paid it. And finally, this year, which was so profound because Debbie Arriacho in the film talks about this, that finally the American Indians settled for something like less than 10% of the interest. Just so they could use the money to help their people. Raise your hand if you just feel like how unjust, how wrong that is to have done to the American people. Did I say American people, the first people? Yeah. And so, if you really wanted to know an American Indian first, you'd have to get to first know their history of what they're sitting in here today. And when I've been looking at your eyes throughout this workshop I could see the long trail of tears in your eyes from the moment we started till now. And I'm wondering how many of you have ever seen that in his eyes. And only since we've been talking more have I been looking at you, looking right at me more with your eyes. You see, when he and I met, I had to earn your trust, didn't I? You see that? Does he understand? Does he care? Is he going to tell the truth? Or are we just going to talk about it? All of that every day. That's why that last question is so important, isn't it? What I need from you, for me to be able to trust you with my story. So what you're going to do is, everybody, what I'd like you to do is, would you do me a favor is, Denise, would you sit over here facing the wall? And would you sit in front of her facing the screen? And all of you are going to turn your chairs to be exactly like them. One is facing the screen and the other one is facing the wall in the back. All right, now this is what you're going to do. The person looking at the screen is going to ask these questions, okay? Only these questions. So whatever's in your hand, put it on the floor. No notes or anything. Put everything on the floor. And you're the one, you're going to be asking this question. Now, when your partner's talking, you don't have to go through every question as fast as you can, okay? It's okay after they share, it's just to give them a chance to talk more. If they get emotional, you don't have to solve it. One thing I've learned about educators or people I work with, you always feel like you have to solve it, and if they feel sad, you have to make them feel good again. I'd like to propose to you that people, when they cry or get upset with these questions, it's their first chance to maybe say it out loud. Maybe the first time they will have even told you out loud and in public. And if you ever learn, as myself as a therapist, is sometimes, as one Palestinian student said, it's so hard to carry inside all by yourself for so long. Nobody ever asks you about it. So just because they cry and talk about it doesn't mean that they're fragile or broken. It just means it just hurts so much that they want to be able to tell you. And what they're wondering is, when they tell you, is, do you believe them? So try and avoid laughing, making a joke, but be really serious, because for some people in this room, this is going on right now, today. Not in the past, not 50 years ago, but even today. So the way you're gonna say it is, what is your ethnicity again?
I don't define myself by ethnicity, so
Oh, where were you born?
I was born in the United States.
Born in the United States. And your parents' ethnicities?
They were born in the United States.
Oh, they were all in the United States. Okay. So you could say, as a white American then? I'm not sure what your ethnicity is.
Well, that's the issue, is that I see that as the problem. I don't want to be put in a box. That's not my identity.
Well, actually, part of what this workshop is that as a Chinese man, I will never be able to escape that, no matter how much I want to.
No, I understand and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm saying, for me, in the way that I have developed myself as a human being, I honestly and truly believe internally that in this country, things are not going to change if people continue to accept being put in boxes, because then it divides our common humanity. And it causes, I understand, it causes a lot of problems.
I could get that for you.
You know, and it's just, I think, because I see us reinforcing those divisions by substituting boxes for identity.
Okay. So what she's really saying, I'm going to interpret it a bit, is I'll bet you that if it was a positive experience being Mexican or being Latina or being black or being Asian in the United States, it was a positive experience where people wanted to learn, and that they also shared theirs, it would be very different. But today, sometimes we may use those very stereotypes to narrow who you are, to define who you are, rather than that it's a great stepping stone to get to know more about you. So you could also see, and I want you to really pay attention to Cecily when she was talking, was this is the residue when you don't have a beautiful, integrative, expansive experience being who you are. Can you hear that? And I can guarantee you that Ben Carson, Clarence Thomas also have shared. When they even asked Ben Carson, what is your ethnicity? He goes, why is that important to you? But everybody knew he was black. When they asked him, what's institutional racism? Ben Carson said, I don't know. But if you see it, do something about it. He had been so, indoctrinated that if he were to bring it up, it would be like, oh. And yet today, I strongly believe we cannot escape it. But the work is to work and find out, where did we get all those images from? Especially the ones that are negative as well as positive, that narrow and categorize people rather than it becomes expansive and allows them to breathe and to grow. And that's partly what we're talking about today. And so what you'll be sharing with her is, as a human being, when others look at you, what do they see? For Starla is, as a black woman, when others look at you, what do they see? So you want to be able to point that out. And for those of you that are white, are German, for the first time you're going to be identified as white, or German, or Russian, or whatever. When others look at you, what do they see? Because I can guarantee you, being a person of color, there's no way you can escape it in the United States. And boy, you know Michael Jackson worked hard. And I guarantee you that being white, you will not be able to escape that in the United States because of the privilege that you will get automatically. So when Donald Trump shows his birth certificates that's not real, we automatically assume because he's white, he has to be an American. So there's both privileges to go with it, so I want you to talk about that, okay? So remember, this person looking at the screen will be the one asking the question. Ready, begin. You get 5 full minutes.
I don't know.
Okay, now, I remember my supervisor once said to me when I was a counseling intern, he said, every 10 seconds I better not be hearing you talking. So he recorded me, so that I worked on getting the other person to talk. Why do I tell you that? Because when I ask people about diversity workshops, a lot of times people of color will say is, we did all the talking, and the white people hardly said anything. They just listened. So I think that's why sometimes we don't have the dialogue. And how easy it is for us as people of color to tell our whole story. But the thing that's lacking sometimes is this. How did you feel about my story? What did you think about my story? Or to have whites look at what's whiteness to them. And so I can get seduced by white people all the time when they ask me all sorts of questions what it's like to be a person of color and then never once talk about what's it like to be white. And I think that's why our students are deathly scared to talk about what it's like for them to be white. And that's why I want to put the emphasis on both of you talking and both of you being curious. Now, what I'd like you to do now is take out your card that you got. And if you don't have your card or you lost it, it's right on the screen. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to look at your partner using their first name. So say, for instance, it's Denise. What you do is go like this. Denise, one of the things I heard you say, you're going to pick out one thing you heard her say that's really important to Denise. Not what's important to you, but what's important to her. For instance, I was on an airplane, and this guy said, how'd you come to do this work? And I said, well, my mother was murdered in 1985 in Oakland, California. And he looks at me and he goes like this. I was born in Oakland too. Where? So in other words, he picked out what was important to him rather than what was important to me. So what you want to do is to stay connected, is to stay on what was important to them. Now I know that your partners could have gotten emotional, really intimate and intense. And sometimes we're deathly scared when people start to get intimate or get emotional. But I'll guarantee you that almost when you're done is many people will tell me is, I got emotional, and what was amazing is she stayed with me rather than avoid it. So I don't want you to think that listening to somebody is this. You think you have it bad, Denise. Let me tell you what happened to me. Okay? That is not a dialogue. That is, one more time, getting to talk about yourself rather than staying with them. And by the way, why is that important? Because your students have learned to keep it on themselves. That they're the most important person, rather than becoming curious about someone else's journey and staying. That's why these questions were created, so that you could get to know them more. Okay? Now, just don't go right down the list. Remember now, the person who's looking at the screen is the one who's answering these questions. The person who was talking, don't look at anything, put everything down on the floor. All right. Don't forget to use the person's first name, and don't forget that the 2 emotional questions are what angered you and what hurt you. Try to remember what they talked about. Ready, begin. Okay, take a breath. Now, for some of you, I can see it's really hard not to want to talk about yourself. And sometimes that passes for a conversation. Or as one black woman said in my film to the white student, all you're talking about is how it affected you, but nothing about what I said. And it's so easy to get into our story rather than fully listen. And by the way, as a therapist, I could tell you that one of the greatest dysfunctions and why people go into conflicts is they don't feel heard. They don't feel seen. And so what would it be like for the full 5 minutes, all your partner was doing all the talking? What if you did not intervene once about your story, but was just about them, asking them more? And by the way, I teach people all over the country how to have that conversation. You don't realize how many people go, that was the best meeting we ever had. It was all about us. I don't know what you did. Or people will go home and they go talking to their partners, just listening and asking questions, and they'll go, were you at one of Manuel's workshops? Because you never asked me questions. And if you want to learn the fastest way to work with your kids as they start to change as they get older is, be a good listener. And it's what you say after they talk about, they're waiting to hear you. Become curious. Whether you value or validate what they've said. So that's why you saw me go around to a number of you sometimes, is you were doing all the talking, you were the listener. And that's not really giving them your full attention. So I want to ask you a question. What made your partner a good listener? Anybody? What made your partner a good listener? Yes?
She was paying attention to what I was saying. She was giving me nonverbal feedback that she is listening. And she didn't just have the same kind of blank stare, but some things that maybe she didn't know, she kind of made, she learned something new.
Good. That's, as you listen to her, those are very refreshing things, aren't they? That what she didn't know, she acted like she didn't know, rather than pretend that she did, which people do a lot of times. And also is her nonverbals. 60% of communication is nonverbal. How many of you can tell when people aren't listening to you, but they act like they are? We do this all the time in classes. Adults learn how to have a really good storefront. Act like you're hearing. Yeah. And what you do is then you actually lose in the relationship. Anybody else? What made your partner a good listener? Yes.
He was able to accurately reflect what I had said and ask questions related to his accurate interpretation of what I had said.
Good. Notice how she keeps saying accurate interpretation? That's really important for her. So what that also tells you is sometimes I get interpretations that aren't very accurate, but it might be those people's issues. They may color how they listen to me. Yeah. I knew he was a good listener. Anyone else? Yes. Dinar.
Kim's very tactile. She touches.
I saw that.
She nods. She nods, and there's a stereotype about Asian women who, they look down and don't look at you, but she looked at me. She made eye connection, and that was new.
Yeah, and by the way, that looking down may be immigrant born. And it may also, it's not true of a lot of Asian women too in the United States, because they may also come from neighborhoods that are primarily white, and so they've learned how to have another way of communicating. Yeah, so it's all that is all part of that. Anybody else? What makes your partner a good listener? Yes?
She made me feel comfortable.
Ooh, she made me feel comfortable. And by the way, as you're listening to him say that, remember now, he's the one who's asking the questions. But also along with that, I think he's also talking about being a Hawaiian man, a person of color, to having someone feel comfortable while he's talking to them, or maybe even leaning. Yeah. As one black man said to me, I wanted to see when I leaned if he or she would go like this, or would they lean forward? How many know exactly what I'm talking about? Lean or pull away. And people can pull away with their eyes, huh? They can even smile as they're pulling back. Like this, okay? Anybody else? What made your partner a good listener? Yes?
She would come back. Number one, she would paraphrase what I said, and I could tell just from her approach, the way she was really engaged in the conversation, and I could tell she was really interested in learning more about me. based on her questioning, and she would repeat something I had told her like 2 or 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So she really remembered what I was telling her, so I could tell she was listening. And some of the things I didn't think she gravitated to, but she caught on to them and she questioned me more about it.
Yeah. Now, as she's talking, take a look at what they've just developed as a relationship, huh? Those are what you're talking about, some really important ingredients to trusting somebody with something about yourself. As she's also sharing, keep in mind, this may be a very unique experience to her, for her. And that she may have lots of opposite experiences when she starts to talk about these issues as a black woman. Yeah. Also, I noticed how you just kept looking at her. Yeah. She doesn't like the limelight being talked about her. How can I tell that? Because she's been taking her left hand like this, going like this. She's very nervous. Some people, when they talk about you, they go like this. They love the limelight. I would love to play poker with her. Anyone else? Yes.
She, when I would explain my position, she would probe me for more.
Right. And I want you to hear, sometimes we're afraid to probe, but we don't even try because we think, I wouldn't like to be probed. But in fact, they might like to be probed. And that might be, and I believe that oftentimes when we go deeper, that's a real respect and honoring that you're that important, that they would want to know more. Which is really, I hope, is an encouragement for you to stop asking, how are you, if you really don't want to know.
Yeah.
And by the way, what I often tell people is, as I did in my film, how did I get them to talk about themselves? I just said, do this. How you doing? No, how are you really doing? Woo! The whole room opened up. The question for you is, do you want to know that much?
Right.
Yes.
Jim had very good eye contact as we were talking and nodding his head, so his eyes is what allowed me to know that that you're really listening. So thank you.
He has that kind of like Santa Claus eyes, you know, it's kind of like this, you could tell him anything, you know, he'd make a fine therapist. But I noticed at the moment I said hello to him, I saw you look up and smile. And what was the first thing I said about your shirt?
My name.
I said, what a beautiful color on you, of the shirt. He was on his laptop, so I think he was busy looking like that. He acted like he heard me, okay, yes.
Eileen has told me a couple of times that she appreciates me sharing so much with her, which makes me feel more comfortable opening up to her. And she also was able to repeat back some of the things that I said in a way that helped me realize things. It's like hearing it back helps me realize more.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful. But the appreciation, I appreciate that she appreciates me. We appreciate each other.
And by the way, you know, Denise drove me in yesterday. We really got down and started talking. She was going, this is really amazing that we got so intimate about each other's stories. And she doesn't remember actually as I started it. I started talking about the impact of my father on my life. And then right after that, she got much more intimate with me about personal things. So I'd like to propose to you, you don't have to wait for someone else to start. You can begin it if you really want to have the intimacy. If you want to talk about racism in a class, talk about what racism has done to you. Or as one white male, as one of my trainers, one of my interns right now, he goes, I'm constantly telling other whites and other people of color what I don't see. That it just goes right by me as a white male every day. And he says, you know, I'm starting to learn is, it's okay. Because it's refreshing for them to hear a white male out of control, scared, not sure. Yeah. Yes.
Shayla was totally present. So when I spoke to her, I could feel that she really wanted to hear what I had to say.
You could feel that. She's got this great therapist look, you know, just kind of right there. Now, by the way, as we're doing this, I want you to imagine rooms that I've done this in, thousands of students, and they're going, this is really great. We're finally having a conversation. Now imagine a whole room of police officers with people who are residents in a community having this. And by the way, the reason why I want you to start noticing each other's ethnicities because there's not a single person in this country that you don't notice their gender and their ethnicity and their age. And the work is to talk about what comes up for you. Can you hear that? Rather than hiding that and then not promote them. Think they're not smart. Thinking they're immigrants. You see. All of these, and that's why the assumptions were important to check out. Now what I'd like you to do is to switch seats. Switch seats with your partner. And you were hoping maybe you'd get out of this room without sharing too. I love hearing about my partner, but not about me. Okay. So once again, these are the questions. What you will discover right now is, if you went deep, so will your partner now. In other words, if you're willing to risk, so will they. Ready, begin. Don't forget to include their ethnicity and gender. Okay, look back at your partner and just think of 2 or 3 things that your partner said that was really important to them. Not what was important to you, but rather what was important to them. Okay? Also, along with that is, don't forget the emotional questions. People often go just to the factual questions rather than looking at the emotional questions, which are angered and hurt. And the past tense questions is, what's familiar about that for you as a, whatever that might be, okay? And that part I've talked about as a Latina, as Black, or whatever, is really important, because I think we skip through that one all over the country. We skip that one. How does it feel like for you to be an American? What I often go is, when did that happen? So it's always important to me, a Chinese American, because my experience is very different than a white person, or Latino, or Black person, or as a woman, etc. Okay? And by the way, once again, if you notice that you're getting nervous to say that, practice it, because no one's going to die. So I think white people are afraid if you call them Black, afraid if they call you Latino, afraid if you call them Chinese or Hmong, okay? That's who we are, okay? That's like one man said to you, I don't see the women that are in my workplace. I said, oh yes you do. That's why all the men are the head positions. Someone's peaking. So I think that we really do see that. We're just afraid of the connotations that go with it. Yes. Ready, begin. Don't forget to use their first name.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So how many of you thought your partner was a good listener? Raise your hand. You better say that, huh? What made your partner a good listener? What made your partner a good listener? Yes.
He pressed on this issue, get the issue explained further, and so give me opportunity to explain in deep of the situation. And he did make me cry.
He's made me cry many times. But that tears that she's saying is a tear of being seen, of being heard, that somebody really wants to go down there with you, huh? And also, I want you to think about how many times she's maybe kept this in and you didn't know about it. You see, I think there's a lot about being an Asian woman that people have not asked her about. And in my newest book, Let's Get Real, one of the things I write in that book is, one of the questions I ask is, what do whites do to keep you from talking about it? And sometimes the way that's done is never to refer to one's ethnicity, just saying just a human being or a person, which I think is also a way of making sure we don't talk about what it's like to be white and what that's like. What's it like to be a male? All the ways we were just talking about how to keep us from bringing this up. And you could see when we don't talk about it, how much is held inside. Yeah. Anybody else? What made your partner a good listener? Yes. Did you hear what he said? She wanted to know more. She wanted to know what happened before. And by the way, that's exactly what's going on in Hawaii today. That they want to start sharing, the reason why we want our land back is what happened before. What's going on right now for you? What happened in the past? How does it affect you today? All the questions that I've noticed when I went to Hawaii, by the way, I spent some time there, was just noticing exactly the way we felt for American Indians. Exactly what people who are Aboriginal in Australia, when the land was taken away. And then we create a whole nother history, putting people away, as if somehow they just gave up their land freely. And then the cost of what that did. Yeah. And so he translates that right over to here too, doesn't he? The idea that you actually want to hear the story, that you want to be curious. And what I also noticed is how oftentimes you leaned right in rather than away. And you notice how more he started to share, didn't he? Yeah. Anybody else? What made your partner a good listener? Yes.
I felt heard, and it was really safe for me to be able to share with her because she could really identify with my experiences.
Yeah. So I want you to hear, if you're ever wondering, why do you want sometimes to have an instructor that looks like you, understands? Because you feel heard. You feel understood. One of the fastest disconnect for instructors to say is, I have no idea what you're talking about. Are you sure it really happened? That's not been my experience. All of that. Or happens all over the world. And that's the fastest way to trivialize. Yeah. Notice what she said. I felt heard and I felt seen. Very powerful words, huh? How many of you could say you have that experience? Yeah. Anybody else? What made your partner a good listener? Yeah.
A good active listener, very responsive, enthused, and she also definitely made me feel very comfortable and safe and able to say what I thought was important.
Good. One of the great misnomers of cultural competency, as the CEO of Shell Oil said to me, this is easy, Meanwhile, you just listen. And I said, well, I don't know anybody who has a relationship where you just listen. It's what you heard, what you understand, and how you're going to respond back to that. Can you hear that? So we get caught up with active listening as if that's all there is to cultural competency. Where the greatest conflict occurs is, what did you hear? What didn't you hear? What did you understand? And what didn't you understand? That's all part of the trust process. You see, sometimes we get on a factual conversation thinking that we're connecting, but we leave out the emotional part. And maybe even what angers you about that, what hurts you about that. Yeah. Because sometimes it's right there, isn't it? Sometimes when I hear a therapist say to me, how did that make you feel? I look at them and I wonder if they want to hear the anger and the hurt. So I know exactly what to say. Yeah. Because that word anger and hurt are very intense feelings that I think we avoid like the plague in this country. I also think that we're deathly afraid of loss. Afraid that we're going to re-wound somebody. But remember what Pat says, it's been a long time since I remembered this. And he still wanted to know. You see, when she shares it, is how he takes it in, doesn't it? And then when he's there with you to also share his own loss, which maybe he doesn't tell a whole lot of people either because you were brave enough to do it. Remember we talked about when you're willing to risk, so will someone else. It's not about just the one-way street that we do it. Anybody else? What made your partner a good listener? Yes.
I thought she was a good listener because I talked about something earlier, and when she was asking me the questions, and I talked about eye contact, and she quickly said, "Interesting, because when you say that, you're not looking at me now." And I said, "Probably because he had me looking at you too much." But the thought that she heard it is what made me know that she was really listening, and that she tuned into it enough to tap on my shoulder and say, "You want this, but are you giving it at the same time?" So to me, I thought that was a great way for me to look back at myself, and even in the questioning part of it.
Yeah. Ooh, those are pretty powerful ones, huh? Make a fine therapist. And by the way, notice how she liked being pushed a bit, and the willingness to remember. I'm noticing you're not looking at me. Sometimes we forget to add in the nonverbal part. Or I notice when you're talking, you're looking down when you talked about this. But when you looked up, you talked about this part. See, I think sometimes we forget to look at the body. Because you know why? Because we're so used to sitting in rows and not looking at anybody when we're talking. So now what I'd like you to do is this. Look back at your partner, and you're going to tell them what you appreciated about their listening and their skillfulness of asking you questions, what you appreciated about both. Ready, begin. So now thank your partner any way you'd like. Californians are always so touchy-feely. Okay. Can you imagine when I was in Minneapolis doing 55 truckers, they said, "Thank you." God forbid they touch. Okay. What did you like about this exercise? What did you like about this exercise? Yes.
Being involved.
Getting involved, being involved with someone. Anyone else? Yes.
I was telling Eileen, I've seen her name so much, and I really like that I got to get to know her.
Yeah.
I like that.
Rather than at her retirement, you finally get to know her. And I know some of you know exactly what I mean, right? Yes.
I like the fact that we don't know anything about each other, and I don't trust people very easily. I don't think she does either. I feel like she could be my friend. It's so special.
Imagine you started off, your foundation was a lack of trust. Okay. But also I'd like to propose to you, this is exactly what people say all over the country is, I've gotten to know somebody that I just met in half an hour, and I shared parts of myself that a lot of people don't even know about. You see, I think we're only one question away, aren't we? But it begins not just with them talking, but when we do it too, doesn't it? Anybody else? What do you like about this exercise? Yes?
Kind of like the same token what she's saying, just when you first see someone, you have assumptions. Oh, they might be prudish, or she may not want to talk, or she's not going to be open to hearing my story. But once I start to open, and then she in turn, because you opened, I'm opening, and then that immediate reciprocity, you don't always have that, but we were able to have that, so thank you.
Yeah. You could feel that in her voice, can't you? And it wasn't just jumping into the topic, but really developing a moment to develop a relationship with each other. Yes?
I like the exercise because it really have you to connect. And I think what have you to connect is those key words that you put up there.
Yeah. Now imagine that instead of having your students hope that they'll have the connected lunch, you actually do that in the classroom, this exercise. And then there I have a whole lot of other ones that I've written about to get your classroom to feel connected. When I did all my 25 years of teaching, my kids loved each other. They went to each other's homes. They learned about each other. They missed each other in class when they weren't in there. You see, there's a term we have in our colleges, students disappearing, like no one knows where they are. And you just keep on doing what you're doing. Wouldn't you love it in a classroom where the student said, "Where's Denard? I haven't seen him. Maybe we should call him." When did we ever lose that connectiveness to each other? And imagine that you could go through an entire year with your students and not one of them have lunch with each other. What would it be like if you had them pair up with someone they didn't know and they had lunch and you gave them a series of questions to ask and you actually gave them grades and papers to do that? What happens if you have people in a circle and go, what's it like to be black? What's it like to be Latino? What opened you up? What hurt you being who you are? And people get graded on how well they heard, how well they listened to them, what touched them. In other words, instead of waiting for a shooting, and then suddenly they go, oh, we're different. But in fact, they're thinking it daily. That, to me, is when diversity comes alive. Not when there's a crisis or there's a holiday, but becomes part of our dialogue. So over 30 million people have now seen my films, particularly The Color of Fear. So I hope you do get to see that. If you are wanting to see that film but don't have $1,000, all you have to do is go online, and it's streamed for $10 for 24 hours. So that we created it so you could have a whole classroom be streamed looking at the film, and it comes with all sorts of questions and everything for the classroom. Also in your packet, which I hope you will take a good look at, that's here, you have no idea what you have in your hand. You have right in here is something like 24 things you could do in your classroom to start a diversity conversation. And the one that's really fun is 21 ways to stop a diversity conversation so a person will never talk about it again. And by the way, these are all things that people say with a smile. And now my list is now up to 101. Why do I think that's important to teach? Because unless our students and our faculty and staff don't learn why these things stop a diversity conversation, we will keep doing them. And one day, when a student hears them, they will probably never talk again, maybe never come back to school again, or pick up a gun. So we have got to start teaching what doesn't work, not just, oh, let's just all have kumbaya, as if somehow we're all one country. Like Colin Kaepernick, I don't believe that we are one country. I think the only time we're one in this country is during election time, war, and taxes. Then we're all one people. After that, we're all being blamed for everything else. Also in your packet, you'll get to learn what unhealthy communication looks like. So do take a good look at that. It's in this packet. And then also is how to have a diversity conversations with teachers and staff. And then along with that is what happens if a staff or a student says this in the middle of your meeting or your classroom. You get to look at it and practice using those questions that you saw on the screen to open up the conversation. And then when I teach in my advanced trainings, which I'm hoping Denise will have me back and Judy will have me back, is I hope to do some trainings here at the college, possibly with Dinar, where we can start teaching some advanced interventions if your entire class were filled with Donald Trumps. What would you say? What would you do? And by the way, make no excuse, remember, there are 14 million or more people who believe he really should be the next president of the United States, and they're sitting on your campus. They're sitting in your classrooms, only they're afraid to say that. But in certain places, they're right out there. The question really isn't, to be honest with you, is that suddenly we're discovering all these people because of Donald. I think it's always been here. But I think because we have a black president is why it all came out in public. That's the real truth. There also is, in here is 4 papers I wrote, is how we have failed our white students and how we have failed our students of color. And then also I did one where I'm going to be doing town hall meetings, going into Ferguson to show them, and I wrote a paper called How to Have a Successful Town Hall Meeting Now That We've Learned How Not to Have One. I thought that was catchy in Ferguson, and the people of Ferguson asked me to come, as well as some of their state legislatures, to begin the dialogue. Make no mistake about it, I am scared. When I was doing my work in St. Louis, Missouri, a police officer kept going everywhere with me. And finally I said to him, are you just interested in my work? I'm just surprised you're even having lunch with me. And he said, I know, I volunteered because I'm on the Ferguson police force. And I'm not going to let them kill you while you're here. I'm not going to let them have an excuse to shoot you. So he followed me to my hotel, made sure I was safe on campus. And when I went out for lunch, he followed me and sat with me. One thing I will tell you, and that is this, is that I would rather be standing doing this work than on my knees and pretending. that I'm not Chinese American and what that has done to me in this country. And I want my son to know, like Denard, we did our very best. This is the hottest selling book. Texas just bought 400, Florida bought 400, because the reason why is, say you get people of color in a room or whites in a room, they aren't going to start talking about it. They're scared out of their minds. But when they read this, they go like this: that's me. People of color go, that's me. And then you suddenly start having a conversation. And by the way, when the University of California just picked out one of these questions, it went on for 2.5 months. God knows how many will go in. And by the way, one of the questions in here, or 2 or 3 of them, is, what's the price? This is for people of color. What's the price of telling white people the truth? And the other one was, what do white people do to keep you from telling the truth? And what do you hide from people of color? And why? These are intense questions, aren't they? And I want to tell you very honestly, is in the film, the white person asked me, why can't you just be an American? And I look at them and simply say, is because you don't see me as an American. And every day of my life reminds me I'm not. And if you did see me as an American, then look at all the presidents of the United States. Why aren't I up there? And secondly is, I am not a little Chinese man. I am not unemotional, unathletic. Where'd you get all those from? And it's important for us to look at where you got those from and for you to take responsibility, and not that I have to outlive those stereotypes. It's not my responsibility to prove I'm not any of those. It's your responsibility to look at where you got those from. And by the way, whenever you have a name in a room, like Marishu, what she just said, work on pronouncing it and then go like this. Ooh, what a beautiful name. Rather than people going like this, huh? Huh? What? How about I just call you MC? All right? Because when people laugh and when people change their names in classrooms, it's because the teacher laughed, couldn't pronounce it, and didn't say it was beautiful and wanted to hear more what it meant and a little bit about the name. And that is why I believe that so many children of color change their names to English, because they'd rather skip all of that. And we miss all that richness. And by the way, for those of you that don't go to, aren't into Florida, this is what teachers do still in Florida for students who come from another country. Hi, welcome to America. Would you like an American name? And it's all English names. And that's why in Florida there are more children by the name of Mickey and Minnie than any other state. How sad to have a name like Monticello or Malachella and then have it changed to Mickey or Minnie. And this is when I actually took 25 years of my diversity training. I put in all the exercises, at least a lot of them at that time, as well as 15 case studies. So that you not only, I copied Virginia Satir, is when I saw a situation, that I wrote about what I was thinking when I heard it. And one time I had one in here, and what it was is I said, okay, I'd like you just to share with you, who's at a corporation, whatever you're thinking. And a man got up and said, all women are good for is to spread their legs and have sex. And by the way, my co-facilitator, who this company demanded that I have her work with me, she ran out of the room crying, screaming, I can't believe you said that. And she ran out screaming hysterically out of the room after that guy said that. And the guy next to him, who was also white, said this, you told us to tell the truth. I'm not saying nothing. And all this happened in the span of 30 seconds. And people said to me, so how did you deal with it? And what were you thinking? And so I said, in the book I write, maybe I went too far this time. But by the way, I dealt with that, getting her back, the two of them crying, and decided to be writing to each other for at least 2 years, all within 15 minutes. So if you would like to learn what those techniques are like, you should either win or buy my book. This is a film called Stolen Ground, which is my first film, which is racism towards Asian Americans. And it really was, I was honored by the American Psychological Association for having the only Asian men's group in the United States that dealt with anger, racism, and leadership. And that was in 1985 when I started that group. And it is still going on today, in which I wanted, this is my Asian men's group, I wanted to show that Asian men are really sexy, romantic, gorgeous, athletic, and pissed off. As I shared with you today, is that this is my last film, If These Halls Could Talk, after 30 years of filming. I did it because, as I shared, the student in my film was murdered. And I have watched almost every day another young person or person getting shot by the police in this country. And I am so tired of it. I wanted the police to say, when Colin Kaepernick said, "I'm not going to stand to the anthem," is to remember what he said is, we've got to take a look at how come so many young people are being killed. I love America, but not until we look at that on ourselves. And I have not heard one single police union say, that's why he's protesting, and questioning his patriotism. I think that's why we broke away from England, is because we felt we weren't valued. We weren't respected. That who we were didn't have an equal voice. I think it is just as true today. And also the issues of gay and lesbian issues and transgender is just as much a civil rights issues as was the civil rights in the 60s. Also with Muslims in this country. Make no mistake about it, if they come for them in the evening, they may come for you in the morning. So stand up for any group when you feel like there's injustice. So let us stand, please. And what I'd like you to do is find a group of 4 or more to hold hands. Okay, so hold hands first. So make sure you close your circle. Close your circle up. And I'm going to have Denard say one thing before we close.
23 years ago, I think it was, I met Benoit here at Mesa College. And one of the things I remember about it is when I came into the room, I was like, how come I don't see any men that look like me? And here I am 23 years later. It's the same shit. And, I really appreciate meeting Kim. Some of you may know I'm a combat veteran in Southeast Asia, and Kim is from Vietnam. And when I sat down, she said, the first thing that struck me was how angry you are. I hadn't said a word. And this is my first time attending a workshop as a participant, because I've been a professional for 20 some odd years, and allow myself to get emotional, because as a professional, as a facilitator, I can't get pulled in. But when Benoit brought up some things, and I get emotional again, it's still with me. And so when you talk about the police, it bothers me that policemen are getting killed. But my thing is, fuck the police. I'm sorry. Those of you that may have relatives who are policemen, if it doesn't apply to them, it doesn't apply to them. But I think police feel they have license to kill people like me. Sanctioned lynchings. They are your judge, executioner, and once they shoot me, they won't call an ambulance. They won't render first aid. They'll handcuff me and let me bleed in the street. And so I have no sympathy for the police. I have no interest in working with the police, because I'm going to be 68 years old, and I'm surprised I'm still here with my encounters with the police. Kim shared with me an encounter with the police where a police officer was about to draw his gun on her over a parking issue. She said to me, in that moment, my life went before me. I knew this man could take my life. And I wanted to hug her, because that's something that I go through every day. When that police officer walks up to my car, as he's walking up there, I'm saying to myself, this could be the day. Either he goes or I'm going to go. And I've experienced about 100 police shootings in my lifetime that I've read about, that I've seen, and not once have I heard a police officer say, we got that wrong, or we're sorry, or maybe we could have done it better. So I have no sympathy for the police until they start having sympathy for people who look like me, and they stop taking away my humanity.
Yeah.
As you're listening to this, once again, I want you to hear what Denard says toward the end. When I hear the police shootings, or someone gets shot, Well, I hear a police officer say, not just the police officers of color, but white police officers saying, we need to look at this. We need to look at how we see black men. And this is what happens. What's the context to which people have decided to shoot police officers? What did we expect after a while when we didn't hold accountability or talk about it or have people take responsibility? And that's really important. When he talks about this issue, one of the ones that just recently came up is police officers were chasing a 30-year-old black man with dregs, 6'3", running after him because he was a suspect, and I forget what it was, running after him. But on their way, they saw a 10-year-old child who was black, about this tall. And they ran after him with guns. And the child was screaming as he ran into his home. And the police officer said it was a mistaken identity. We thought he was a 30-year-old guy, and he was only this 10 years old. And what did he do? He ran towards home, and all the residents in that area surrounded him and said, "What are you doing? He's only 10 years old." And it was the first time I heard, first of all, is that people came out of their homes to say, "Don't go after this person. What are you doing?" And the police officers had their guns drawn. And when they came up to the residents, including the mother, said, "This is my son. He's only 10 years old. How could you have mistaken him for a 6'2" black man who has dreads? How could you possibly mistaken them?" And what Denard's talking about is not one of the police officers said, "I'm sorry." Not one of the police officers stayed. Not one of the police officers came back. And this is what they said to the mother. "We didn't point the gun at him." And the other officer said, "You got a complaint? Go down to the police station." And it is not in any one of our newspapers today. And it happened 5 days ago. And this is what you'll get, is an anguish, unless police officers stand up and say, "You're right, we never should have done this. We should have talked. We should have owned up." Otherwise it will build up. No more different than racism does. No more different than sexism and homophobia does. So look at the people in your group. And Denard, if you mind if you join them, please. And by the way, remember what Denard said is, 20 years ago I was here. Now I look back and where is the black man in this college? And I saw you go right on. And maybe look in your room, your circle, and you'll see some people crying right now. It has been my whole life wondering someday if we could just have a black president, boy, we would be so much further along. But I was dead wrong. We have a black president, but look at the way we treated him. So what I realized, it doesn't matter if you have all black faculty, all black administration, if the group isn't open to them, wanting to learn, receptive to work together, it does no good. It will do this country no good to have a woman to be president if we're not open to working with them, learning from them. Can you hear that? And it is your responsibility to say, and to ask of our congressmen and senators is, you were elected to work for the good of the country, not to simply vote like the Republicans said at the onset of this black president's, we will vote no on everything until the next election, and they did, and we didn't even hold them accountable. God, what it must have been like for him to go home every night. And we have got to say something about that in our classrooms and for our students to get activated to do something about that, so it won't happen again. And if you take a good look at some of the people in your group, some of your elders, I think they would tell you, I think I've seen too much for too long. And it takes a toll. And that's why I came today. I don't want to get really old in my life and go, I'm so tired. And I get so tired seeing Kim and Starla and so many others crying, and some younger folks in this room crying. I want them to feel like they have hope. You are the leaders you're looking for. And I hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation here at Mesa College. So I wish to thank you for having me here. Denard, as always. It saddened me to come back to the place where I met Denard in hopes that someday it could change here even more. And I know Judy and Denise and so many others are trying to have this dialogue here on this campus. I hope you would join them. I hope you would encourage the students to have these conversations. If not you, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you, everybody. Thank you.